Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Owner's Box After Dark. I am your host, Mark Farinella, and welcome to the palatial surroundings here at Fulton Pond Studios in Mansfield, Massachusetts, Studio A. It is the 27th of October, 2020. We are getting close to the first anniversary of the creation of the Owner's Box, the original Owner's Box, the podcast on audio only. Of course, as you're probably aware, I'm sorry about the cheese, but that's my dinner tonight. As you're probably aware, the Owner's Box actually started kind of on a whim, I guess, of mine, just to spend some money and get some equipment to have some fun. And it's turned into a little cottage industry. Of course, the Owner's Box After Dark started up in July of this year. But this is the 23rd episode of the younger sibling of these productions, and I'm happy to welcome you into my home. Pardon me while I'm eating here. It's delicious mozzarella cheese. I love it. Almost like a little pizza here. Now, if you're wondering what this is, I called a pizzeria in Washington, and since I am I guess a lot of people would call me one of those radical left Democrats, I ordered some of the chilled blood of a young abducted child. Yeah, that's what the Republicans and the QAnon types actually think that Democrats do. Actually, I don't consider myself a liberal, overly liberal, radical left type of Democrat because, first of all, I'm not registered as a Democrat. I am registered as unenrolled, I guess is what it's called. And that, of course, is the beverage of choice tonight is V8 juice, 8 blended vegetables. It's delicious. Wouldn't you rather have a V8? Actually, I do like this stuff. You know what I do? I put a little lemon juice at the bottom, and it mixes in. It tastes like one of those tomato juice cocktails you used to get at a fine restaurant before you get your dinner. And actually like it. It's better for me than the crap that I drink normally, right? And speaking of red, the candle, of course, the mood candle is still the Macintosh because it burns just so nicely and smells so great, and it matches my drink tonight. How about that? I should have worn a red shirt. Now people would think I'd turned into a North Attleboro Red Rocketeer. Okay, let's see. First on the docket tonight. The temperature is about 40 degrees outside, so the weather is definitely changing. I was still out in the convertible today, but not with the top down, and I had to go buy a new battery because, it's the original battery. The car's 5 years old and finally gave up the ghost yesterday. I had to call AAA for it. But, so I bought a new battery today and then went shopping and got my abducted tomato blood here. Delish. One thing that bothers me about this time of year, aside from my seasonal allergies, which have been killing me lately, and I apologize in advance if I sniffle and snuffle and have to pull out the handkerchief at some point. It's not because I'm contagious or you're not going to get any disease from watching this podcast, but it's just a matter of fact that my seasonal allergies have really kicked in at this time of year. And it's even worse when all the leaves are falling off the trees outside and they land on the ground and they get ground up, especially the ones that fall in the street. The cars go by, they grind it up, all that little particle stuff gets into the air, and then it gets into my house and into my nose, and I had a rough time earlier this week. In fact, I would have done a podcast earlier in the week, but I couldn't talk. I was choking on my words, and I'm not mocking anybody. Please understand that. This little thing in your mouth? Thing that bounces off the top of your mouth. I'm sure you'll love seeing that. The little thing that bounces off the top of your mouth like that, it's called the uvula, I think. Mine swelled up because I couldn't breathe out of my nose, so I had to sleep the whole night breathing out of my mouth. So as a result, it swelled up to like about 3 times its normal size. It's annoying. It doesn't cause any real issues. You're not choking on anything like that, but it does not allow you to get the air down there to produce the words and the sound the way you would want to. So it really, and a friend of mine called me, I think it was Monday early in the evening, and it hadn't really healed up yet. So I spoke to her and I just said, I'm not going to mock my own voice here, but I just said to her that if you can't understand me, I will slowly repeat everything I say. And she admitted she had trouble understanding what I was saying because it was weird. It happened to me one other time 30 years ago under circumstances I really can't reveal on a family show. But the fact of the matter, it remains. I'm okay. It's healing up fast. I actually had a virtual meeting with my primary care physician earlier today, and everything was fine. But yeah, one of the things I was saying, one of the things that really bothers me about this time of year is that the bugs that are outside and suddenly realizing that their days are numbered, they want to come inside so they can stay warm, find water, and maybe even create their nests and have their young ones in them so that their generations will continue on. I like to think that this house, even though it is as old as I am, it is 66 years old, probably about 6 months younger than I was in its completion. I like to think it's tight. I don't think it has too many gaps in the walls, too many places where bugs can get in, but spiders can get in anywhere. They're very, very tenacious. And so I usually keep a tally on my little whiteboard that I have in the kitchen there, of the number of spiders that have snuck in and have managed to met their demise at my hand during the season. Now, look, I know they help kill mosquitoes outside. Now, but that's outside. When they come in here, they have no right to live rent-free in my domicile. I'm sorry, they don't. So they run the risk. If they're big enough that I can sort of catch them and release them into the wild, so to speak, I might do that on occasion. But for the most part, and that's that for them. So since November 11th of 2019, it's almost time for me to turn the clock around again on that. I have dispatched 20 spiders within my house, and I think that's a record in the 5 years that I've lived here since I moved back in. So I'm not happy about that. I've been looking all over for where they might be able to sneak in, but can't do anything about it. I'm sorry if I offended you by killing spiders, but like I said, you live here, you pay rent. Got to earn your keep. Sorry. Okay, the next little topic for today is the news that happened earlier today in the front page of the Boston Herald, where it announced that it was endorsing Donald J. Trump to win re-election as President of the United States. Well, that's not unexpected. The Herald is the small tabloid newspaper, the second of two in Boston. Now, you may not be, for those of you who are not familiar with Boston newspapering, there used to be something like 8 daily newspapers in Boston, and they've gradually condensed into 2. The Boston Globe is the ultimate survivor because it wasn't even in the best newspaper of the city back when there were that many. A lot of people say that was the Boston Post. The Boston Post was the best, but it had the best writers, but not necessarily the best following. And the Globe kind of maintained its presence in the market as being milquetoast. They didn't offend anybody for the longest time, so as a result, they survived. Now, the Herald is the product of multiple newspapers. There was an original Boston Herald in the 1920s and so on back. In fact, the house that I used to live in downtown Mansfield, the third floor, the attic, had linoleum floor, and we had to pull it up at one point, and we found, as insulation, we found several copies of the Boston Herald, the old broadsheet version of the Boston Herald, preserved magnificently because they had not been exposed to air or light in all those years. So we're talking in the 1980s when we did this project, and we found all these newspapers that were 60 to 70 years old and looked like they'd just come off the press. And that was interesting. But the Herald and the other paper that was published by the same outfit, the Traveler, which actually a lot of people liked the Traveler because I think it was the evening paper. And the evening paper had the better writers, the columnists and such. Well, the Herald and Traveler and the Sunday Advertiser, well, actually, no, they kind of had lost circulation and were bought up by the Hearst newspaper in the town, which was the Boston Daily Record and the Boston Evening American. Now, strangely enough, that's the paper we used to get, the Evening American. It was a tabloid format, the smaller paper, and we'd have it home delivered. And the Traveler, the Evening American had some really great sports columnists in it, and that's what I grew up reading. And I learned an awful lot from reading those guys. But the Record and American eventually merged into one newspaper. Their Sunday paper was called the Sunday Advertiser, and that name was dropped when the merger took place. And at some point, and I'm not exactly sure when, I think it was 1971, I think around there, the Hearst people bought out the Herald and Traveler folks. So the paper got merged, and eventually, after several permutations of the name, eventually just became the Boston Herald going down the road. And that's pretty much the Herald that you see today. Used to be owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News. Used to be owned by a publisher that had a publisher and owner that had spun off from Murdoch's outfit, didn't have enough money to sustain it. Now it is owned by a bunch of vulture types, venture capitalists, and people who look for the bottom line, just like what happened to my own newspaper. In fact, you know me, folks. I didn't introduce myself as the guy who I usually introduce myself, but I worked for the paper in Attleboro, and it got sold from the people who owned us, and the people who came in immediately cut people off staff, and I was one of them. That's what happens to a lot of newspapers nowadays. In the meantime, the Globe has it's lost circulation as well, but the Globe has maintained its position, I guess you might say, as the preeminent newspaper. And of course, it has gotten outstanding writers over the years, had a great sports department for many, many years, still not so bad when you look at other cities. And of course, the Spotlight team. You cannot ever debate that the Globe Spotlight team has been a major factor in producing good journalism. And of course, hopefully you'd seen the movie Spotlight, which told the story of how the reporters on that particular team ferreted out the depth of the Catholic Church hiding the priest that had assaulted and so on with young, vulnerable boys, well, for many years. And that was one hell of a movie and one hell of a piece of journalism all that time, and certainly worthy of the respect of anybody. But the Herald has taken on I guess you can call it the opposite political tack. They became the conservative paper in town, and they it's no surprise whatsoever that they would endorse Donald Trump, because the Globe wouldn't do it, for one thing. I'm not so sure. Let's face it, I live in Massachusetts. Massachusetts may be the bluest state in the nation. It may be the one state outside of one of Ronald Reagan's terms that I can remember. Massachusetts hasn't voted red Republican for decades and decades and decades, and I don't expect it will do that now. But in the meantime, what happened today was that a writer, and I don't know the fellow, I never worked with him, so this fellow, I guess, is their new Red Sox beat writer, and he wrote a tweet today that said that he was basically, just paraphrasing him, he's basically ashamed that the story that he wrote today about the Red Sox off-season stuff, would appear in the same newspaper on the day when it endorsed Donald J. Trump on its front page. Well, he took a lot of blowback for that. Some of it was angry. Some of it was like mocking. People were saying, well, didn't you know the way you worked? I mean, it's the Herald, you know? And yeah, I mean, I can see that point. But having been in a situation like that, I would never fault a staff writer for feeling upset about the political leaning of the editorial board of a newspaper. Look, when I first went to work at the Sun Chronicle in 1977, there was a catalog of all newspapers in the country published by Editor and Publisher magazine. And it would have all the facts and details about your newspaper, your circulation, your ad rates, some of your staff, you know, what towns you cover, et cetera, so on and so forth. And it would also have your political affiliation. And newspapers used to announce their political affiliation in those days, back in the, you know, that was the 1970s, so that was about the end of that. But the Sun Chronicle was initially a Republican newspaper, and not surprisingly so, because southeastern Massachusetts is one of the few areas in this state that will occasionally vote red. Those occasionally back Republicans. And I mean, if you look even at the last election, most of the towns closest to Attleboro, including my hometown, Mansfield, and Foxborough, and a couple of others nearby, voted pretty overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton. But the towns to the south and east, heading down towards the Cape, were pretty solidly for Trump. Still nowhere near enough to overcome a 1 million vote or more deficit between Trump and Clinton at the end of it, which is, of course, why Hillary got the state's electoral college votes. But anyway, I felt bad for this writer because he's taken a lot of shit from people who are, and basically saying, well, didn't you know your damn newspaper was like that? And I just like, you know, it's so sad because, first of all, I like the Herald sports writers. I know a lot of them. I've worked with many of them. They do the best high school sports coverage, certainly, in the town, and they've given the Globe a good run for its money in the other sports until their staff started getting hacked to death by these new owners that actually moved them out of the city of Boston. They actually publish out of Quincy now, I think. So, but I wrote a response, and it goes like this. I think he knew. Can't help it. But sometimes the truth is a cold, hard slap in the face, and you just have to vent. Kind of like realizing now that Tom Brady is a preening douche, and he probably was for many of the years that he was here. But it didn't piss you off as much then. See my point? My point is, we love Tom Brady around here. We really did. And, you know, yes, he was kind of a douche. And that no way denigrates his accomplishments. I mean, look, he's the best. He's the GOAT. And I don't like using that phrase, but he really might legitimately be the greatest of all time. And in fact, if he keeps up what he's doing in Tampa Bay right now, that's even going to further cement it because, you know, winning as much as he did with the Patriots, 6 Super Bowls, 9 appearances, all those AFC East championships, tomato cans. Hey, wait a minute, tomato cans. Hang on. All that, you know, Brady certainly, he earned his keep here, no question about it. But I kind of remember that humble, skinny kid that arrived in Foxborough at the old stadium in April of 2000 after being drafted in the 6th round, 199th overall. And I watched with some measure of disappointment over the years as he gradually became increasingly enamored with himself. You know, and look, I know that sounds harsh, but, you know, he started winning and right off the, you know, sooner than anyone expected, the 2001 season after Drew Bledsoe got hurt, and they end up winning their first Super Bowl championship. And then they go on to win, you know, 3 of the next 4 or so. And actually 2 of the next 3 after that. And certainly, you know, he was good. There was no question about it. And at that point, he started to begin to enjoy the fruits of his labors. I mean, he started dating starlets, and he started living a little more openly, I'm better than you are type. And then, of course, the whole thing, Gisele Bündchen, the most popular and most wealthy supermodel in the world. They meet in San Diego. It's a love match to start, and then the song starts singing the angels cry, and all is wonderful. And so I can't take anything away from him as a player, and I am not even remotely attempting to do so. But all those, first of all, there was that 9-year gap where they didn't win anything. And that's interesting. Then, of course, as he's getting older and he's feeling a little threatened perhaps by younger quarterbacks, kind of a guy named Jimmy Garoppolo maybe on the roster, he starts playing hard again and they start winning. But in the last couple of years, Tom kind of walked away from the Patriots a little bit, and he wouldn't go to the off-season training stuff, and his new receivers had no idea who he was until he showed up for training camp. And then, of course, I'd watch him berate his teammates on the field when they'd screw up, or at least he would think they screwed up. And that was kind of the way that Dan Marino used to do it in Miami at the end of his career, and I never liked watching that. So it was very disappointing to see. And the point of all this is that in the case of the Herald, it's not that you don't know how things are. And you know that things aren't always as you wish they would be. But to be honest, it's okay to be disappointed by what is. Even when you know what the score is, because you wish they had taken a wiser approach to an endorsement, especially when you realize that what that endorsement represents. And it's tough. They sign your paycheck and you're there to do a job. And as I felt back in the 70s and early 80s when we were a quote-unquote Republican newspaper in Attleboro, you hope it changes. And it did in our case until we stopped selling newspapers, and then things went the other way. Okay, I was going to go into much deeper into the presidential election, which is just only a week away, but we'll have another podcast before then, and I'll let it all hang out in that one. So, all right, now, the Patriots. Okay, it was ugly. No getting around it. 33-6 loss to the San Francisco 49ers at Gillette Stadium. Jimmy Garoppolo's team. Jimmy was 20 for 25, 277 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions for a passer rating of 79.5. Okay, not necessarily great, but this game was never, ever close. Cam Newton looked like he was basically out to lunch for the whole game, and he's even said so I'm not saying something that he hadn't already said. He was 9 for 15 for 98 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a passer rating of 39.7. And he got yanked in the third quarter in favor of Jarrett Stidham. And no veteran quarterback ever wants that to happen to him. And that would have been really awful if not for the fact that Stidham stunk just as badly. Completed 6 of 10 for 64. No touchdowns, an interception, and his passer rating was 39.2, so it was actually worse than Newton's. There's really nothing to be said that's positive about this game. Maybe I could look and see Jacoby Myers finally had a little bit of a breakout game. He caught 4 of the 6 passes thrown at him for 60 yards. He was the leading receiver, and he had one 23-yard catch, I think, taken away from him by a penalty somewhere else, so that's kind of unfortunate. But the running game did nothing, and then you go to defense, and the secondary was torched as always. Running defense, the rush defense was terrible. They weren't able to stop Jeff Wilson, 112 yards on 17 carries and 3 touchdowns. Okay, so Newton became the first NFL player in the game to reach 30,000. Well, he's gone over the 30,000 yard passing mark already, and he also went over 5,000 yards in rushing. So he's the first NFL player to hit both of those milestones in his career. Whoop-de-doo. But I don't want to overreact completely. Now, understand, right now they're on course for 7-9 on this season if my picks for the rest of the season hold up. That game against Denver kind of screwed things up. I originally said 8-8. I think they might be able to make that up if things turn around a little bit, but I don't know if it's going to. It's not going to happen this week, I don't think, as they go to Orchard Park, New York, to play the Buffalo Bills. And yes, those are the division-leading Buffalo Bills at 5-2. The game's at Sunday at 1. Yeah, Bills 5-2, Miami 3-3. Can you believe that? Patriots 2-4, and Jets 0-7. And that's, well, at least thank God for the Jets, right? Okay. The sad part is that the talk all week, and it will continue on for some time, I suspect, is should the Patriots become sellers? Should they trade off people? Should they get rid of Cam Newton? Should they have signed him in the first place? What about Andy Dalton? Maybe they could have gotten Ryan Fitzpatrick from the Dolphins. Huh? No, thank you. I mean, I still feel a little bit badly about Garoppolo being gone, but you know what? It happened. That was Brady, and that was also Robert Kraft kind of pulling the strings on that. And it's funny too, as you see right now what's happening in Tampa Bay. Sure, the Bucs are playing pretty well, but Brady recently, and he claims he didn't, but he basically bullied the Buccaneers into signing Antonio Brown. And you may remember him. He's the off-suspended reprobate wide receiver with some talent and absolutely no social grace whatsoever. He's out. He's available. He's they always say these players have a short leash, but I don't believe it because he kept coming back and coming back and coming back. But Brady loved him when he was here in New England for the brief time that he was, and he thought that he had the deep threat that he always wanted to have, and then he screwed up again with whether it was drugs and also emails to his ex-girlfriends and all sorts of disgusting stuff. It makes you wonder, though, about what's going on in Tampa, because I think this whole situation is a clear sign that it's Brady and not head coach Bruce Arians that runs the show down there in Tampa Bay. And you know what? That was kind of the same situation that was starting to happen here. And, between Kraft and Belichick and Brady, I mean, it was clear Belichick wasn't going to win in that battle with those two. So somehow it had to happen. And Brady was the one, obviously, who left in free agency. And Kraft kind of backed down a little bit to let him reach free agency. So, well, we all knew it had to end sometime, right? But you know what? None of this should be surprising. The only thing that surprises me about it is that how bad they look doing it. Now, look, they had plenty of opt-outs before the season. They've had COVID interruptions. They've had players test positive or be in contact with people who had COVID-19. Newton was one of them, obviously, and he had to sit out a week. So you sit back and you wonder, is that as disrupting as it looked? Probably was. And they've had injuries. The offensive line hasn't played together. So, and my thought is, look, nothing's going to turn this season around into a Super Bowl berth at this point. I mean, miracles can happen, I suppose, but I wouldn't count on it. So I would say just give Newton a little bit more time. Let him try to straighten things out himself. Some people think he may be hurt. Some people say his throwing motion doesn't look right. His footwork doesn't look right. He's running the ball effectively, but his quarterbacking skills look like they're a little off. So maybe if he can try to work that out a little bit. Get him a receiver somehow. It's too bad they didn't get Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, he'd be better on just one leg right now than some of these guys are on two. I mean, but maybe there might be somebody out there, if they have to make a trade at the trading deadline, maybe. I don't know if they really should spend, too much for it. I mean, they have draft they have plenty of draft picks. Maybe they can work something out that way. Get the running backs more involved. I think that Damian Harris, I think Rex Burkhead, James White, I think you can get a lot more out of these guys than you've been getting at this point. But again, the offensive line has to play together, and they have to kind of get that cohesion that they had at the beginning of the season. They have to be able to run block and pass block. And if they can do that, maybe at least they can still have a respectable finish to this season. I kind of hope so. Otherwise, we're going to be listening to years and years of, it was Brady all along, and Belichick's a loser without Brady. Yeah, we'll hear a lot of that. Oh, boy. We will be back to the owner's box after dark. After this message. Yum. Absolutely delicious. Welcome back, everybody, to the owner's box after dark. Episode 23, as recorded here in Mansfield, Massachusetts, Fulton Pond Studio, Studio A. And I, of course, am Mark Farinella. You knew that. I wanted to talk briefly about something that's come up, and it's called, I guess it's a fear that's arising in the hearts and thoughts and professional minds of a number of healthcare professionals and psychological experts. We're looking at rising numbers in COVID-19 right now. We thought we had reached the curve, and flattened it in this state and in much of the Northeast, but I think I saw on television today we are now at 7.5 cases per 100 people tested, and that's way up. We are about to have the end of daylight saving time, so we are going to go to standard time. It means we turn the clocks in the other direction, fall back, and so it's going to get dark at 4:15 in the evening. Nobody likes that. People have more accidents because they don't see the roads as well anymore because they're on their phones anyway and they're tweeting and texting. And so there's all sorts of things that kind of turn. The weather's getting colder. We lose that warmth and the fun of the excitement of being outside, and now we have all these threats, and of course the presidential election in the background, and God knows what might be the case depending upon the outcome of that. So the experts are saying that they're afraid that there will be a kind of a perfect storm of situations to arise where you have all these depressing factors coming to bear, and as Joe Biden said, we're going to be in for a long, dark winter. Long and dark and winter. And I don't have a snowblower. I wish I had bought one this year because I don't know if I'm going to be able to shovel with this knee. But anyway, yeah, and I can understand that too because, it's the end of the year, the cold returning, Why do we all feel so excited in March and April when the weather really sucks? Because we think it's getting warmer, it's going to be nicer. So, but to that end, I tweeted something today that I figured that my friends would appreciate, and the text of it went as such. There will be no seasonal/pandemic depression in my house if we still have a high school basketball season. And that was it. That was what it said. And immediately, some of my friends who saw that immediately tweeted their approval. Among them, Lisa Downs, a popular guest here on the Owner's Box, and of course the very successful girls basketball coach at Foxborough High School. And, of course, my friend Kristen McDonald, the boys basketball coach at Norwood High right now. But, of course, you remember her as the coach that won 4 state girls Division I titles at Braintree High School, and has since taken that big challenge to take her talents to the boys game. So, yeah, they agree, and they agree wholeheartedly with me. In fact, Kristen wrote something that was kind of telling too. I mean, she responded by saying, "At what point do we start really taking the mental health of kids into consideration, and adults too?" she said, which is true. I mean, I just remember how really heartbroken those Foxborough girls were when they found out that they could not play in the state championship game against Taconic Regional High School on the, I think it would have been the 13th of March, the last game of the season, going for a state title. And at the beginning of the pandemic, the state, I would imagine wisely now in retrospect, but the state said, nope, we're canceling that. We're not going to create the super spreader. And that phrase had not even really come into being yet. But they were afraid that large crowds at the, in this case, it would have been the DCU Center in Worcester. They were afraid that large crowds would create the potential for widespread infection. Well, widespread infection, as you know, took place no matter what. Earlier today, the Centers for Disease Control reported that the total number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States of America were 225,084. That's a lot. The total number of cases in the U.S. were 8,680,611. Now, I suppose if you want to find good news and all that, almost 9 million cases, 225,000 deaths, well, it means an awful lot of people got better, and including a few people I know, which I'm happy about, definitely happy about. But still, we have a higher number of deaths in this country than proportionately anywhere else in the world. And we're supposed to be the smartest and the best and the brightest and so on and so forth. Well, we're all scared because it's coming back. And they anticipated this. They said they'd think it would happen. And people who cared to listen to the scientists and the doctors were rightfully scared to death about it. I hate even talking about it because, look, I'm going to be 67 years old in a few short months. Every time I have a sniffle from whatever pollen there might be in the air, I'm scared to death because I think that maybe, just maybe, somehow I got exposed to coronavirus. I wear the masks. I socially distance as much as possible. Even when we do our telecasts in the press box at MacTaz Field in Rentham for King Philip soccer and field hockey, there's plenty of room between me and my analyst, and we're both wearing masks, which is why our broadcasts sound like this most of the time. Actually, we sounded better than I thought we would. And we are well removed from the kids, more than 40 yards away from the nearest sideline. So we're the kids and us, we're not interacting. And there aren't many people in the stands. They are very strict about that right now. Well, we don't know what the case is going to be with winter sports yet here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And we expect perhaps next week that there will be guidelines put out by the state's Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, as we call it, the EEA. Now, the first thing you think is that it'll probably be a lot of rule changes that will try to protect the athletes on the courts and in the rinks for basketball and hockey. Certainly, we saw changes. We saw a multitude of infractions added to soccer that are designed to prevent contact and other things that could spread the disease. So now soccer is like field hockey with all the whistles in it. And in field hockey, they took 8 players off the field. They reduced it from 11 on 11 to 7 on 7. So there are 4 poor kids on each team, 4, that don't play. Now, there's a lot of substitutions and kids get into the games, but in both cases, it's not just the kids, but it's also the coaches and the officials. They are all trying to play or coach or officiate a sport in a manner totally alien to how they've done it all their lives. And it's tough. It's not easy especially not easy for the kids. They're not supposed to head the ball in soccer anymore. But there are so many times the ball's up in the air, and the first instinct of these kids is to go up with their heads in place for the header. And then in the middle of what they're doing, they realize they're not supposed to do that, so they have to like bend somehow or crane their necks back or something and let the ball hit here or something like that. And oh God, I feel terrible for the kids because they're trying to do something they've never done that way before. And again, as I said, coaches have to coach differently, and the officials have to try to make sense of all this too. And I don't envy them. I don't envy the position they've been put into. So we're all wondering what's going to happen with basketball and hockey. I suspect that, I think it's already been rumored that checking will be out of the boys' game, which will make for, I suppose, a more genteel sport out there. But I don't know how these kids are going to respond to that. Basketball, I mean, I know everybody used to say that basketball was a non-contact sport. Well, guess what? Basketball's changed. There's a ton of contact. Now, I can understand they'll probably be really tough on hand checking and stuff like that. Don't touch the player as they come in. But you get under the basket. What about boxing out? Boxing out for rebounds. How can you get position on somebody if you're not using your body? Maybe they'll have to take 2 kids off of the line for each team and spread everybody out. That's a possibility. You know, you go into the lane and there won't be as many kids in the rebounding position, so the ball could fall and bounce all the way to the other end of the court without anybody touching it. Maybe, I don't know. But one way or the other, we all want to have games. And now, here's the scarier part. The biggest factor that I'm most worried about is that because of these rising COVID numbers, I'm just afraid that if there are games, and it wouldn't surprise me if the EEA just said, that's it, pull the plug. But if there are games, they will have to be conducted in empty gymnasiums. I can't see them allowing any number of fans. I think back to one of the greatest games I've seen in high school basketball in ages. It was the Mansfield versus Attleboro tournament game, boys basketball, last year at the Albertini Gym in Mansfield. Ended up being a 2-point game. Mansfield battled back from 12 down to win the game at the end, although Attleboro's Bryant Sissio threw up a 60-footer as time expired, and it hit the back rim.
Matty Bowen puts it up, no good. Rebound is by Weir. Sissio will launch the long shot. It goes off the back of the rim, no good. Mansfield wins the ball game.
Holy smokes, he almost stole that game.
What an amazing...
So close to stealing that game away right then and there, and so amazing. And the place was packed. This place probably holds about 1,000 people normally, and I guarantee you, I haven't talked to anybody about what the actual number was, and I don't think they'd want the fire marshals. I don't even know if we have a fire marshal in Mansfield, but I don't think they'd want the fire department to say, well, you know, we looked the other way on this one. But I think there were probably about 1,500 or 1,600 people in the place. They were all lined up 7 or 8 deep behind both baskets. It was incredible, and it was hotter than hell, and we're talking February 29th, and it was just incredible. Just the atmosphere. It was basketball like what you'd expect in Indiana or someplace like that. It was magnificent. It was a great game, and as were most of the tournament games I saw this year and the year before that. But that could all be just gone because of all this, and it would not surprise me, because here in Massachusetts, action was already taken in one direction, because there were outbreaks on youth hockey teams, and in many parts of the state. The state just stepped in and said all rinks are closed until November 7th. And that was it. No youth hockey, no men's hockey, no old guys hockey, no nothing. The rinks were closed. Now, maybe that's a good thing, because I don't know how many of you have been in a locker room in a hockey rink, one of the high school hockey rinks. Most of them, we have a few really nice ones that have opened up recently around here. Then the state rinks are a little older, but those locker rooms stink. That's all there is to it. I mean, the kids come in there, they're wet, they're sweaty. They have this rubberized stuff on the floor because they're walking around in their skates, and it just stinks to high heaven in there. It is awful. I mean, I can think of 1 or 2 guys when I was a kid at Mansfield High, in the old high school, in the Don Curve Gymnasium's locker room. And some guys would just stuff their stuff in there at the beginning of the football season and just never take it out. And so by the time like November rolled around, if somebody opened that locker, you could actually smell it from outside anyway. And somebody opened that locker, and you'd just be hit by this just wave of putrid stench. Well, that's kind of what a lot of these hockey locker rooms smell like. So maybe this will give the rink operators an opportunity to kind of look at what they're doing and find ways to socially distance a little bit more, to clean up these places a little bit more, make them a little bit more respectable in terms of, germs and such. I suspect, and this is one thing I've heard already, is that hockey players will basically have to come dressed in the buses to the game. And the only thing they'll really be allowed to do in the rink will be put their skates on and what other little equipment they have otherwise. But so, maybe that's something that will help these things proceed on. Basketball, it's not that hard to play a basketball game and throw 5 coats on and go home and shower. So hopefully that would do it. But if they take players off the floor, if they make it 4-on-4 or something like that, oh God, that would be ridiculous. Look, I definitely want a winter season. I've said this before. I, as you know, do play-by-play for basketball teams from 3 of our local schools around here: Foxborough, Mansfield, King Philip. King Philip primarily is that's the paying job. Mansfield and Foxborough are both the from the heart jobs. And I'm actually considering trying my luck with hockey a little bit. Not just because I'd like to get a few extra dollars, but you know what? First of all, if I could call soccer, I can call anything. I'll think back to when I talked to Jack Edwards on the Owner's Box, the audio version, and I did talk to him at length about this, and I'll try to pick up a few pointers there, but I probably have to do it a lot different than Jack. Jack practically does a radio call. He's on top of the action, and I could not do that with hockey anyway. But a lot of hockey announcers don't follow what's happening on the ice as such until it gets into one of the zones, and they'll be able to keep up with it better there. But not every exchange, not every pass, not every steal gets called on the radio by a lot of the guys. And especially not on TV, because TV is a visual medium. You're watching the game. So, but I figured I'll give it a shot, and maybe I can convince my friend Glenn Farley, my football broadcast partner, to come and help me out a little bit. He follows hockey more than I do, so I think he'd be a big help to me if I attempt to do hockey. But it would be nice to try something else as well, as long as it doesn't conflict with my basketball, because that's number one. in my heart, and I admit it. But I just want to do something, anything. It's all up in the air right now. I have to keep my fingers crossed. I don't want to be depressed, and I won't be unless there's a reason. I got to admit, though, it'll be pretty tough to take if next week we have a certain orange-faced individual winning a second term in the White House, and the EEA comes out and says, nah, we can't play these sports in the winter. It's too scary. That happens, I'm moving to Newfoundland. Actually, I probably am not, because last I heard, Canadians don't want us crossing the border right now. Wise people they are. And that should do it for episode 23 of the Owner's Box After Dark. I thank you very much for your patience. Hopefully I made this one a little bit shorter than some of the other ones that were recently on, but just to keep your attention, keep you happy. As I said, I'll have a pre-election episode, and that will be basically kind of a co-produced audio and video version. So the audio will go out to the wider audience of my popular podcasting platforms, whereas the video one, of course, you can always find that on YouTube or on my links on Facebook and Twitter. So, if you would like to see links to all of my podcasts, audio and video alike, or some of the other information that I've put in there, in fact, I have a full breakdown of what the Hockomock League is going to do for a postseason tournament in field hockey and soccer this year, and you really should read that. It is on my personal blog, Blogging Fearlessly, but to get to it, you go to www.theownersbox2020.com. Repeated it many times. You should know it by now. If you'd like to send me an email and let me know what direction you think these telecasts, broadcasts, whatever I'm doing should go in, you certainly are welcome to do that at theownersbox2020@gmail.com. And, of course, snail mail is always available to you. And I actually got something in the mailbox the other day that finally was meant for the Owner's Box, and I'm so happy about it. The address is the Owner's Box, Post Office Box 272, Mansfield, Massachusetts, 02048. So, without further ado, I wish you all a very, very happy Halloween, except don't come to my house. I don't give out candy. I'm eating it all myself. No, I'm like my mother. I don't want some kid to trip in my driveway and sue me. So, enjoy it if you can. I know it's going to be a different situation this year. It's still there, but socially distanced, do all those things. Use your hand sanitizer. I do. I'm very happy to use it. It keeps my hands smelling wonderful. I get loaded off of this stuff. And I've got other things. I wear my masks religiously, and you should too while we continue to do this. Please don't listen to the idiots that say that masks are a hoax and so on and so forth. Wear them. Just wear the damn things, please. If not for everybody else around you, for yourself. Why not? You don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die from your germs. Let's all stay healthy, and let's be happy as we hopefully draw closer to an end of all this, to maybe a happy Christmas and New Year's season, hopefully basketball and hockey. Let's try to get there in one piece. And vote. Please. Go to your polls. If you haven't already, go to the polls on Tuesday and vote. Good night, everybody.